Hello and welcome. Did you ever find yourself searching for something online? How long did it take to get a response from your search? You search for something and you get a response back in no time. That's really something, isn't it? But did you ever think about how it all happens? In this video, I will guide you through the basics of how the internet works. Let's start at the beginning. You open your favorite app on your device and you're instantly connected to the world. This is all made possible because two devices connect and communicate via a wired or wireless connection, forming something called a network. You can connect multiple devices to this network, but this becomes very complicated very quickly, as each device needs to connect to every other device to communicate effectively. This problem is solved by something called a network switch that connects multiple devices and allows them to communicate with each other. The network switch can connect to other network switches, and now two networks can connect. These network switches then connect to more network switches until you have something called an interconnected network. This interconnected network has another name that you might be familiar with. It's called the internet. When we use websites or video streaming services on the internet, these are provided by computers called servers. Our devices are called clients. This is known as the client-server model. The internet connects the entire world. Have you ever had a video call with someone on another continent? That video data traveled through large undersea cables connecting the world's networks, and these cables can transfer huge volumes of data per second. There are a lot more technical details that go into making the internet possible, but this is the main idea. Hopefully, this gave you the big picture of how the internet works. A server is a computer that runs applications and services, ranging from websites to instant messaging. It's called a server because it provides a service to another computer and its user, also known as the client. It's typically stored in something called a data center with hundreds or thousands of other servers, all running different services connected to the internet. There are many different systems in data centers to ensure that servers have continuous power, continuous internet connection, and are kept cool 24 hours per day. Did you know that there are data centers located all around the world? Many websites use these to allow you to access your content quickly from the data center nearest to you. The data center servers are built based on the server's purpose. For example, if the server is only to be used for storing images, it might have a lot of hard drive space, whereas a server computing complex calculations might need a fast processor and a lot of memory. This is usually referred to as the server hardware, the physical components of a server. Once the server hardware is installed in the data center, a piece of code can now run. The code that runs on the hardware is commonly known as software. One way I like to remember this is to think of hardware as something you can physically touch and is difficult to change, as you need to physically replace components. Software is soft or easy to change, you just replace the code running on the server. The services a server can run can vary, but in this video, you will learn about a type of server software known as a web server. A web server has many functions, which includes website storage and administration, data storage, security, and managing email. Another primary function is to handle something known as a web request. When you open a browser on your device and type the name of the website, it's the job of the web server to send you back to that website's content. This process is known as the request-response cycle, and you will learn more about it later. Web servers are also designed to respond to thousands of requests from clients per second. In this video, you learned about web servers and how they consist of hardware and software. You also learned that one of the primary roles of a web server is to respond to web requests from the client. You may have heard the terms web pages and websites, but what's the difference? A web page is a document that displays images, text, videos, and other content in the web browser. A website is a collection of web pages that link together. You've likely visited many websites this week. In fact, you're watching a video on one right now. Let's explore an example where you visit your favorite encyclopedia website. When you arrive at the homepage, it contains many links to different articles. Clicking on one of those links brings you to a new web page article, and that article links to even more articles on other web pages. If all these web pages have a similar address in the web browser's address bar, it can be safe to assume that they belong to the same website. However, the links on the page do not all have to link to the same website. They can also link to other websites. For example, when you visit your favorite search engine and search for a phrase, the search results are a list of links to other websites. Did you know that as I'm talking to you, thousands of websites are being launched to the internet? Every day, hundreds of thousands of websites are launched. To put things into perspective, the Great Pyramid of Giza has 2.3 million blocks of stone. So think about it. In 1 week, there are as many new web pages as stones in the Great Pyramid. With current internet speeds, it would take 3 million years to download all the web pages on the internet. And all of these billions of varied web pages rely on the same core technologies. Most people interact with websites in some form daily, but few know how a web page actually works. I mean, what's it made up of? And just how does that web page get from the web server to what you see on your screen or device? Well, let's explore that now. In its most basic form, a web page is just a text document. You can open and edit with any text editor, but developers usually use more sophisticated tools for working with web pages. If you want to work with a web page, you need to know about 3 technologies and understand how they interact. They are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML structures the content you see, CSS controls the colors and style, and JavaScript is responsible for the user interaction. As a web developer, you will work with these technologies every day and understand how they work together. I always like to imagine it like this. Think of a shop. HTML is the actual building, the structure. CSS is the interior decoration and landscaping outside, and JavaScript is just like the business, the services offered, and the people coming in and out. Let me give you a brief overview of each of these technologies now. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It works by using something called markup tags. These tags describe the content that is displayed in the browser window. This content can be things like headings, paragraphs, images, and even multimedia elements such as audio and video. The way HTML describes the content is known as markup. CSS is short for cascading style sheets and adds visual enhancements like colors and layout to the web page. This is commonly known as styling. It works by enhancing the HTML elements and telling them how to display. Have you ever noticed a friend change their color or style of their hair? Well, your friend's hair is like the HTML, and the color and style is CSS. The last technology is JavaScript, which is a programming language built into the browser. JavaScript provides web developers with tools for interactivity, data processing, control, and action. Have you ever tried to log into a website only to be told that the information you provided was incorrect? Or browsed your favorite video streaming site and seen content update in real time? Well, that's JavaScript in action. JavaScript is the powerhouse of a web page. It has the ability to manipulate the content that you see on the screen as you interact with it. In fact, without JavaScript, websites would be kind of boring and very limited in terms of what you can do. Okay, you now know about the essential technologies a web page contains, but how exactly does this code get translated to display the content that you see on your screen? When a copy of that web page is sent from the web server to your browser, each line of code is processed in sequential order from first to last. As each line is interpreted, the browser creates the building blocks, which is the visual representation you see on the screen. This creation process is known as page rendering. The response from the web server must be a complete web page in order to fulfill the request to show the page in the browser. You will learn more about page rendering from the additional reading at the end of this lesson. And there you have it. You now have joined the exclusive group of developers who know how a web page works. You learned about the technologies that make up a web page and how they interact with each other. You also learned that the page is rendered by the web browser to display what the end user sees on the screen. In the time since you started, you use a web browser every day on your devices, and you probably have one open right now watching this video. But do you really know how they work? In this video, you will learn what a web browser is and how it receives and displays content. Let's get started. A web browser, or browser for short, is a software application that you use to browse the World Wide Web. It works by sending a request to a web server and then receives a response containing the content that is to be displayed on the screen of your device. Once the browser is open on your device, there is the address bar where you input the address of the website that you want to visit. The address is commonly known as the Uniform Resource Locator, or URL for short. The URL contains the protocol, or the HTTP, the domain name, usually the name of the website, and the file path, or the path to the page that is displayed. When you make a request using this URL, the browser and server communicate using a protocol known as the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP. Once the web browser receives the content, it displays it on the screen of your device. This exchange of information is made possible by something known as the request-response cycle. Now, let me demonstrate this using an example many of us are familiar with, searching the web. First, you open a web browser, which is a software application. Next, you type the name of your favorite search engine. The name you type contains something called a domain name. Then, when you press enter, the web browser sends a request across a network and connects to another computer on the internet called a web server. The web server is a special type of computer that allows other computers to make requests for data. The web server responds by sending a web page back to the browser. Once the browser receives all the response information, the search engine web page is made visible. The web page is a coded document that is rendered by the browser and then presented visually to you, the end user. Now that the search engine web page is loaded in the browser, you interact with that page to search for what you want to find. For example, type restaurants near me in the search bar and press the search button. Once again, the browser prepares and sends a request to the same search engine web server. This time, the request contains the added instructions to search for the phrase restaurants near me. The search engine web server processes the request by taking the keyword and using it to find the requested data. This data is stored in something called a database, which is connected to the web server. The web server then picks up that data and sends it back to the browser. When the web browser receives the full response from the web server, it again renders a visible web page with links to some restaurants, a map showing nearby locations, and more related information such as reviews, lists, and even reservations. Success, and all made possible by computers having a conversation. You have now gained an insight into how the request-response cycle works. And this web request cycle is very similar for a number of other activities we do online, be it chatting with friends, watching our favourite movie, or sharing files with our work colleagues. That is just a brief summary of how the internet works. The next time you search for something online, think of all the steps and data that gets exchanged to complete your request. Okay, so by now you know that websites and files are stored on web servers located in data centres. But what if you wanted to create your own website? Do you really need your own data center with specialized hardware and software? Thankfully, the answer is no. And developers can launch websites to the internet using something known as web hosting. Web hosting is a service where you place your website and files on the hosting company's web server. You're essentially renting this space in return for stable and secure storage. And you don't need to be a company to use a web host. Individuals can rent space too. In this video, you will learn about the different types of web hosting services that you can use for your websites and web applications. First, let me share with you some of the different hosting options available. These can include shared hosting, virtual private hosting, dedicated hosting, and cloud hosting. Let's explore each of these hosting types in a little more detail now. The cheapest form of web hosting is known as shared hosting. You pay for a location on a web server containing many web hosting accounts with shared hosting. This means that you also share the server's processing power, memory, and bandwidth with other websites that might slow your performance. This option is best for a small website with a small number of visitors. Many developers also use this as a low-cost sandbox environment to practice deploying or hosting their personal websites. Some companies offer free shared hosting, but with limitations, and often have advertisements embedded in the web pages. Sites with more considerable demands use virtual private servers, or VPS. A VPS is a virtual server with dedicated CPU, memory, and bandwidth resources. It will be running on a hardware server with other VPS instances, but as the resources are fixed per VPS instance, your website is unlikely to be impacted by the performance of other VPS instances. A VPS instance will be more expensive than shared hosting. The next option up is to use dedicated hosting. This will be a hardware server that is dedicated to you only. All hardware CPU, memory, and bandwidth resources are yours to use. Generally, this option is more expensive than a VPS hosting. The last type of web hosting is something you may have heard of. Cloud hosting and the cloud has grown in popularity over the last decade and is often mentioned in various news and services you use. With cloud hosting, your website is run in something called a cloud environment, which spans across multiple physical and virtual servers. If a physical or virtual server fails, your website will run on a different server and stay online. The main advantage of cloud hosting is that you can use as many resources as you need without hardware limitations. However, you pay based on resource use. For example, if you transfer a file from the cloud to a web browser, you'll pay for the bandwidth used for that transfer at a fractional cent cost per megabyte. While this can quickly become more expensive, it allows websites and web applications to scale their cost as popularity grows. This is how many of the major web applications operate. In this video, you learned about web hosting and the different hosting options available to individuals and companies. Soon you will build your very first website. Are you excited to get it hosted so you can share it with the world? For more information on web hosting and services, please see the additional reading at the end of this lesson.